Have you ever trusted someone so completely that betrayal didn't even seem possible? I did. And the person who broke that trust wasn't an enemy or a stranger from a boardroom. It was my own son. My name is Richard Hale, 60 years old, born and raised in Texas. I came from nothing, no inheritance, no family connections, just grit. My father died when I was 19, leaving me a rundown truck, a pile of debts, and a lesson that stuck. If you want something to last, you build it yourself. So I did. I spent my 20s laying bricks, roofing houses, fixing whatever I could just to stay afloat. By 35, I'd opened Hale Construction, a small contracting company that built homes for working families. At first, it was just me, 2 employees, and a dream. By 50, we had over 100 people on payroll, projects across the state, and a reputation built on honesty. People said I was old-fashioned. Maybe I was. I paid my workers on time, treated my clients like friends, and believed a handshake meant something. Everything I built was for one person, my son, Ethan. He was my pride, my reason for every early morning and every late night. I sent him to the best schools in Dallas, and when he got into Harvard Business School, I sold one of my trucks to help pay tuition. I used to tell my crew, one day Ethan's going to take this company national. The boy's got brains I never had. When he graduated, I stood in that stadium surrounded by thousands of families, watching him walk across that stage. I remember clapping so hard my hands hurt. In that moment, I thought, this is the legacy I've been working for. But people change. Success changes them faster. When Ethan came back home, he wasn't the same boy who used to help me unload cement bags or grab burgers after work. He came back with a designer suit, a fancy watch, and an attitude colder than a marble floor. At first, I thought it was maturity. He started talking about investors, expansions, tech integrations, words that felt like a foreign language to me. "Dad," he'd say, "you've done great, but it's time to modernize. I can make this a billion-dollar company." I smiled, proud and blind. "You do what you think is best, son." That's how betrayal always starts, quietly, politely, disguised as progress. A few months later, he came into my office with a folder of documents. "Dad, these are just some tax adjustment papers. The lawyer said we need to update ownership titles to reduce liability." I didn't even read them. Why would I? He was my son. My blood. I signed every page. That night, I slept peacefully, believing I'd done what any proud father would, trust his son. 3 weeks later, everything collapsed. It was a Thursday morning when I got a call from Mark Graham, my longtime attorney. His tone was uneasy. "Richard," he said, "I just want to confirm, you did intend to transfer your company to Ethan, right?" I frowned. "What the hell are you talking about?" He sighed. "All corporate shares, properties, and assets have been legally transferred. Ethan Hale is now the sole owner of Hale Construction and its holdings. You're officially removed from the board." For a moment, I couldn't process it. My hand shook so badly I nearly dropped the phone. "That can't be right, Mark. He wouldn't, he's my son." But paperwork doesn't care about emotions. I called Ethan right away. No answer. I drove straight to the office I'd built with my bare hands. The receptionist, a girl I'd hired 2 years earlier, looked terrified when I walked in. "Mr. Hale," she whispered, "I'm sorry. I was told to inform you that only authorized personnel can enter without clearance." "Authorized?" I snapped. "I founded this damn company." She looked away. "I know, sir. But those are Mr. Ethan Hale's orders." That name, Mr. Ethan Hale, hit me harder than any blow. I pushed past her, stormed into my old office, and found another man sitting at my desk. My son's things were already there. His laptop, his framed degrees, his nameplate. Mine was gone. I stood in silence until he appeared in the doorway. "Dad," he said calmly, "I wish you hadn't come here." "What did you do?" I demanded. "I did what had to be done," he replied, his voice cool and rehearsed. "You built something good, but it's outdated. Investors wanted control, and the easiest way was through me. Don't take it personally, it's business. Business." I shouted. "You stole everything I worked for." He didn't flinch. You taught me to think like a businessman. Well, I did. I just got better at it than you. I took a step toward him. Better? You think betraying your father makes you better? He stared straight into my eyes and said, "It makes me powerful." Those words cut deeper than any knife. Security came in moments later. My own employees escorted me out. I didn't resist. I just walked through the halls that still smelled of sawdust and paint, remembering every corner, every nail, every handshake that built this place. Outside, the sun was setting over the skyline. The Hale Construction logo glowed proudly on the building, but my name didn't mean anything anymore. That night, I drove to my farmhouse outside Austin. When I reached the gate, 2 new guards stood there. "Sorry, sir," one said awkwardly. "Mr. Ethan Hale instructed us not to let anyone in without authorization." I laughed, though it sounded more like a sob. "Authorization? That's my home." He looked down. "I'm sorry, sir. Orders are orders." So I parked my truck on the road outside my own property and watched the lights flicker inside. My son was having dinner with investors. Celebrating, maybe. I sat in silence, feeling the weight of 60 years crush down on me. The empire I built with my hands had vanished with a few strokes of my pen. People later said, "That's what happens when you trust too much." Maybe they were right. I rented a small room behind a diner on the edge of town. The walls smelled of grease, and the bed springs groaned every time I turned. I ate alone, spoke to no one, and thought about every mistake I'd made. Each night I told myself, he took my fortune, my company, my home, but not my will. I was broken, yes, but not defeated. Because deep down, I knew something my son didn't. Money builds power. But character builds destiny. And one day, he was going to learn that the hard way. The first few months after losing everything were hell. I woke up every morning in that tiny room behind the diner, listening to the sound of traffic outside and wondering how my life had collapsed so fast. 60 years of work, gone with one signature. At first, I felt paralyzed. I didn't know what to do, where to start, or who I could even talk to. My phone barely rang anymore. Friends disappeared overnight. The people who once called me Mr. Hale now pretended not to see me at the grocery store. That's what failure does. It makes people uncomfortable. But somewhere between the shame and the silence, something inside me hardened. I realized that maybe God had stripped me of everything, not to punish me, but to remind me of who I used to be before money softened me. I wasn't always the man with suits and offices. I was the man who built them. So, I went back to my roots. I started spending mornings at an old cafe downtown where retired contractors and workers still gathered. Most of them were men I'd hired 20 years ago. They didn't look at me with pity, they looked at me with respect. One morning, Tommy, one of my oldest crew foremen, sat across from me. "Boss," he said softly, "you got knocked down, sure. But I've seen you climb worse mountains. You taught us how to build homes from nothing. Build yourself again." That hit me deep. So, I did something I never thought I'd do again. I picked up a hammer. I started taking small contracting jobs myself, renovating old houses, fixing fences, repairing barns in nearby towns. No one recognized me anymore, and I liked it that way. I worked alone, drove an old Ford truck, and ate cheap meals. And while I worked, I listened. Everyone in the business world was talking about one thing: Ethan Hale's company. Apparently, he'd rebranded my construction firm into something slick and corporate. Hale Innovations, he called it. He promised smart homes, tech-driven housing, and big investor profits. But greed always walks faster than wisdom. Within a year, rumors started to spread. Delayed payments, lawsuits, layoffs. Ethan was trying to grow faster than he could handle, and it was showing. I stayed quiet. I didn't want revenge yet. I wanted timing. One afternoon, I was repairing the porch of a small farmhouse when an SUV pulled up. A woman stepped out, mid-40s, sharp suit, clipboard in hand. "Are you Richard Hale?" she asked. I hesitated. "Depends who's asking." She smiled. "I'm Melissa Grant, senior consultant at Redwood Development. We're working on a housing project outside San Antonio. One of my engineers mentioned you used to run Hale Construction. I looked at her, surprised. Used to, yeah. A long time ago. Well, she said, we could use someone like you. Someone who knows the old school craft, not just spreadsheets. That moment felt like a door reopening. I didn't plan to step back into business, but maybe that was the universe's way of telling me to stand up again. I joined as a part-time advisor. The pay wasn't much, but the respect I got from the workers reminded me of who I was. Melissa quickly realized I wasn't just another builder. I understood leadership, negotiation, and people. Within months, she promoted me to oversee entire site operations. Meanwhile, Ethan's empire was falling apart faster than anyone imagined. His investors pulled out. News headlines started showing up. Hale Innovations faces lawsuit over fraudulent contracts. CEO Ethan Hale accused of mismanagement. But I didn't gloat. Not yet. A year later, Melissa called me into her office. We're thinking of starting a new division, something focused on affordable housing, built ethically, with local labor, she said. Would you be interested in helping lead it? I stared at her. That was exactly the kind of dream I'd once had before greed ruined it. We registered a new branch, Hale Foundation Homes. She insisted on keeping Hale in the name, saying, it carries weight. People still trust it because of your legacy. It felt poetic, reclaiming the name my son had dirted. I poured everything I had into that project. Long days, late nights, driving across counties to meet small-town families. We built houses for veterans, single mothers, and retirees. Every structure stood like a symbol of resilience. Slowly, the press began to notice. Former construction magnate Richard Hale returns with mission-driven housing company. I became a story again, but this time, one worth telling. And then one evening, something unexpected happened. I was finishing up paperwork at the site office when the door opened. It was Ethan. He looked nothing like the confident man who'd once thrown me out of my own company. His suit was wrinkled, his eyes tired. He hesitated for a moment before speaking. Dad, he said quietly, can we talk? I leaned back in my chair, studying him. Now you remember I'm your dad. He didn't answer. He just exhaled heavily and said, everything's falling apart. The lawsuits, the investors, the debts, I can't fix it. I need your help. For a second, I almost felt sorry for him. But then I remembered sitting outside my own house, being refused entry like a stranger. I folded my hands. Why should I help you, Ethan? He swallowed hard. Because I'm your son. I nodded slowly. You were my son when I needed you too. But you chose greed over family. You took away everything I had and called it business. Now you're here because you finally understand that money can't buy peace. He didn't argue. His eyes filled with tears, but he didn't speak. After a long silence, I said, you're right about one thing though, it was business. So let's make this business. He looked confused. What do you mean? I smiled faintly. You want me to save your company? Fine. I'll buy it. His eyes widened. Buy it. You'd take it from me. No, I said calmly. I'll redeem it. The same way I redeemed my name. Over the next few months, I negotiated quietly with Ethan's creditors and investors. Using my new company's reputation and Melissa's network, I took over Hale Innovations through acquisition. But I didn't keep it as a private firm. I turned it into a non-profit training institute for young builders. The company my son stole became a place to teach kids integrity and craftsmanship, things he never learned. When the deal was finalized, I handed him the papers. Congratulations, I said. You get to watch what true rebuilding looks like. He stood there speechless. For the first time, I saw something in his eyes that I hadn't seen in years: humility. I walked away without another word. At 61, I was no longer the man I used to be. I wasn't rich the way I once was, but I was fulfilled. I'd rebuilt not just a business, I'd rebuilt my soul. Sometimes, the sweetest revenge isn't taking something back. It's proving you never needed it in the first place. And Ethan was about to learn that lesson, one headline at a time. When the last signature dried on those acquisition papers, I didn't feel triumph. I felt stillness. The kind that settles in after a long storm, when the air smells of dust and rain, and all that's left is quiet. For weeks, I avoided the media calls. Reporters wanted interviews, headlines like, "The father who took back his fortune." But I didn't want revenge to be my story. I wanted redemption to be. So I went back to work. Only this time, the job was different. The newly formed Hale Builders Institute wasn't about profit margins or quarterly growth. It was about purpose. We trained young carpenters, welders, and engineers, kids who'd dropped out, veterans trying to start fresh, men who'd lost their way. I taught them the same way I taught myself years ago. Measure twice, cut once, and never lie to a man who trusts your work. Every morning, I'd walk through those dusty workshops hearing the buzz of saws and the laughter of boys half my age, and I'd think, this is what legacy should sound like. And then, one afternoon, Ethan walked in again. He didn't come dressed in silk or arrogance this time. He wore a plain gray hoodie, jeans, and a face that had seen too many sleepless nights. He stopped at the entrance, hesitant, as if the floor beneath him might reject his weight. "Hey, Dad," he said quietly. I turned. For a moment, I didn't recognize him. Success had once made him tall. Regret had made him small. "What brings you here?" I asked, keeping my tone even. He looked around the workshop, at the young trainees sanding wood, at the logo that still carried our family name. "I saw the article," he said, "about the Institute. I wanted to see it for myself." I nodded but said nothing. Let him speak. He took a deep breath. "You were right. About everything. I thought success meant control. I thought power meant being above people. But all it did was empty me out." He paused. "I lost everything, Dad. The house, the investors, the people I trusted. When I finally looked around, there was no one left." I studied his face. The arrogance was gone. What remained was my son, just older, broken, and searching for forgiveness he didn't know how to ask for. "You hurt me, Ethan," I said. My voice didn't rise, but it trembled. "You didn't just take my company. You took my faith, in family, in blood. You turned me into a stranger in my own name." "I know," he whispered, "and I hate myself for it. I don't expect you to forgive me." I sighed. "Forgiveness isn't about expecting, son. It's about understanding. You wanted to build something bigger than me. You just forgot that bigger doesn't mean better." He looked at the floor. Can I work here? Learn from you again?" The room went silent. Even the hum of tools seemed to fade. For a long moment, I didn't answer. Part of me wanted to say no, to make him feel the emptiness I once did. But revenge loses its taste when you finally hold peace in your hands. "Come back tomorrow," I said finally. "But not as my son. As a student." His eyes filled with tears. "Thank you," he whispered. From that day forward, Ethan worked like a man chasing redemption. He showed up early, stayed late, cleaned tools, and listened. The workers didn't treat him like a former CEO. They treated him like one of them. And that was exactly what he needed. Weeks turned into months. Slowly, I watched something change in him. He laughed more. He stopped checking his phone every 5 minutes. One day, I caught him teaching a young kid how to level a beam properly, patience in his voice. I realized then, he wasn't just learning construction. He was learning humility. One evening, after everyone left, I found him sitting on the steps outside the workshop, staring at the sunset. He said, "You know, I used to think you built buildings. But you built people, Dad. You built me too. I just broke myself apart before I could see it." I sat beside him. "We all break, son. What matters is how we rebuild." He smiled faintly. "You really forgive me?" I looked at the horizon, the sky turning gold over the Texas hills. "I already did. The day I stopped wanting you to fail." Years passed. The Institute grew beyond anything I'd imagined. We expanded across states, training thousands of workers, partnering with charities, rebuilding communities after floods and fires. Sometimes I get letters from people who'd never met me but said, "Your story gave me the courage to start again." Those letters meant more than any paycheck ever had. Ethan eventually became one of our senior trainers. He never asked for leadership positions, never used his last name to impress anyone. People respected him not because he was my son, but because he'd earned it. And I learned that justice doesn't always come with noise. Sometimes it comes quietly, in the shape of peace, in the sound of laughter returning to your home. One Sunday morning, years later, I was sitting on the porch of that same farmhouse I'd once been locked out of. The boards creaked under my rocking chair, coffee steaming beside me. The property had been donated to the foundation now, but they insisted I keep living there. It wasn't mine anymore, but it finally felt like home again. Ethan came by with his wife and little boy. My grandson ran through the yard, chasing a toy truck, his laughter echoing through the fields. Ethan watched him, then turned to me. "Dad, he keeps saying he wants to build things like you when he grows up." I chuckled. "Tell him to build them better." Ethan smiled. "He'll try. He's stubborn, like us." We sat there, the wind brushing through the trees, the air thick with warmth and memory. And I thought about how strange life is. The same blood that once betrayed you can also bring you peace years later. People think revenge ends with someone losing. But in truth, real revenge is when you rise so high that forgiveness becomes the only language left. That night, as I closed my eyes, I whispered a quiet prayer, not of anger, but of gratitude. For the pain that shaped me, for the loss that rebuilt me, and for the son who finally found his way back home. Because in the end, I realized something I wish I'd known sooner. Wealth fades, power shifts, names get forgotten. But legacy, true legacy, isn't about what you leave behind. It's about who you lift back up before you're gone. Betrayal can break a man, but forgiveness rebuilds him stronger. Revenge loses meaning when peace feels better than pride. You don't change your fortune by destroying others. You change it by changing yourself.